Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com and welcome to this JavaScript events masterclass. It's everything you'd want to know about JavaScript events, or at least most things. Now what I'm going to do is first we're going to start off in the browser before we go into node events. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new sort of index.html. I'm going to just create a boilerplate, exclamation point, boop. Okay, and for here, right now I'm going to create one button with the ID of 1, because I'm going to end up creating 2 buttons before this is said and done. And the button will just say 1 on it. And then I'm just going to do my JavaScript right here on this page. So I'm just going to put a script tag. Okay, and there's our setup. Cool. So now let me open this up in the browser. Open it with Live Server. Boop. And there it is. We have this button that's called 1, and it doesn't do anything. So our first lesson is we want the button to do something. We want it to happen, something to happen when we click. So a click is just one type of event. There's lots of events. You can hover over something, that's an event. You can change the value of a form field, and that's an event. You can just push a key, and that's treated as an event. So the point is, we need to learn how to use these events. So in particular for this button, before I can actually use the event, I need to have the button in a variable. So let's grab the button. Okay, and the way we do that, we use document.Queryselector. This is just something that allows us to query the document object, which is all the different nodes on the HTML screen. Okay, and we query it using CSS selectors. So I can do that by just going, I want the button, but I want the button with the ID of 1. Okay, so let's make sure that I get the button with the ID of 1. Okay. Oh, I have to put this in quotation marks because this is a CSS selector. There we go. And just to make sure that we grab the right button, I'm going to do console.log. And we actually have to store the button in a variable, so const button 1 equals that. So let's console log button 1. Okay, let's go back over here, open up our terminal, Control-Shift-I, go over here to console, and there you go. So we're console logging the button, good. So we grab the button. Just want to make sure that variable has the right thing inside of it. So now that we've established that, we want to add what's called an event listener. An event listener is essentially what it is that it listens for this particular event that we're going to specify with a string called click, and whenever that event happens, it'll run this function. So button 1 is our button, and we want to add an event listener to it. And the first thing we have to specify is what kind of event we want. Okay. Which is a click event. Okay, so we want a click event. That's what we're listening for. And when that event happens, we're going to pass in this function. And I'll talk about what this event thing is in a bit. But, and then when we click the button, we just want it to alert saying, I have been clicked. Okay, so anytime I click this button, it'll listen for that click specifically on that button, because again I attach this event listener to this specific button, and whenever that button is clicked, this function will run. So let's try it out. I click on the button. I have been clicked. Yay! Click on it again. I have been clicked. Yay! Great. So that's kind of how an event works in the browser DOM. Now notice that we get this event object. Okay, that's always going to be passed into any DOM event, and we can use it to do all sorts of cool stuff. Okay, so let's say I want to, let's console log the event itself, so you can see all the kind of information we have in there. So let's go back over here. So take a look at my console. There's the alert, and then here's it says a mouse event, and it gives you all these details about the event. So you can find all sorts of really useful stuff here. The most useful thing really is going to be current target and target. Okay, which there is no current target, so there must be only a target which should be where's target? Oh, there it is, target, which is the button. Okay, so so basically, if the target and the current target are the same, you'll probably have this detail where basically current target is null, or was that? So many different things. But then this target is the actual button, so now we see all the properties of the button itself. So we can access all the button's properties straight from this event object, which makes it really useful. Okay, so for example, I can access the event, the target.id. Okay, so now I'm accessing the ID of the button because that's the target. So I get 1. Now let's say I want to hide other information in this button. So I want to create like a custom property. So we'll just say, hey, my info equals Gouda. Okay, so I have this custom attribute. I can get that. I just do event target, that's the button, and then just do get attribute, and then get attribute, I pass in my info, because you can get any attribute by just using this get attribute function on that element. So I'm getting the my info element from there. So it should console log Gouda. So let's try that out. Okay, and there we see Gouda. Okay, so it works. Okay, that does what we want it to do. So that's a cool way to be able to store information on any particular element and grab it as you need it. Okay, and the event allows us to grab whatever. So we can store stuff. We can have like 50 buttons on the screen, and they all have the same event listener and the same function, but it doesn't matter because it's always going to do it relative to that button if I'm using the event target. Okay, so it's pretty useful. It's a pretty useful little piece there. Cool. So that's how that works. There's a couple other fun functions inside the event. So you can do like event dot stop propagation. This basically prevents the event from bubbling. So imagine that button is inside of a div, and that div also has a click listener. Okay, let's actually do that so you can see it. So let me put this button inside of a div. Control X. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the div too. So const div equals document dot query selector. And since there's only one div, I'm just going to say div. And we'll add a event listener to the div as well. So we'll just start spacing this out a little bit more. So div dot add event listener. Click. And then here's the event. And we're just going to say console.log I happen to. Okay, save. So now let's see what happens when I click on the button. I have been clicked. But see, two things console log here. Not just Gouda, which happens from the button, but I happen to, which was triggered by the div. Because when I clicked on the button, since the button is in the div, it triggers the events for the div as well. This is called event bubbling. It's bubbling up. Okay. Now, what if I don't want it to bubble? Then what I would do here is on the button, I would do event dot stop propagation. And that'll prevent the bubbling. So now when I click on the button, only the button's event will get triggered. So now I hit this, I hit that, and see now it's just Gouda. It happened, doesn't show up anymore. I stopped, I prevented the bubbling. The other important function inside the event is called event.preventDefault. The benefit of this event is really that it prevents forms from refreshing the page. So you hit submit on a form. You can have it where you can trigger a submit event without refreshing the page. So it's really for using with primarily with form tags. There's a couple other uses for it, but That's the main thing. It prevents the page from refreshing for a form. So if you have an event that's like a submit event, so it's triggered by a submit on a form, you probably want this, unless you're actually sending the form data somewhere. Okay, but if you're using like React, Angular, any kind of front-end framework, you're doing a single page application, you don't want that to happen. So event.prevent default would prevent that form from refreshing the page, in case you ever run into that problem. Okay, and we'll leave that this first video. So this first video went over DOM events. The next video will go over custom browser events. I'll see you guys in the next one.